Given the time of year, we are going to head back to the Halloween franchise. Let's get into it. Hey, welcome back to my channel. Now, we're going to do Halloween H20 today. I know I said I wasn't going to do any more Halloween reviews this year, but I feel the need. It's the season, and I did 4 through 6, and I was going to save H20 and Resurrection for next Halloween season, but what the hell. We're going to do H20 today, we're going to talk about it, and we're going to do Resurrection next week, and boy, do I got shit to say about Resurrection. Oh, yes, I do. But I got some stuff to say about this one. We're going to do the better film first, and this is the order they came in, so let's do it. Now, Halloween H20... well, originally, after the middling success of Halloween 6, which did okay, it made some money, but not enough. And if you remember what Dimensions used to do, they would acquire properties like Hellraiser. They did 2 Hellraiser films that went to theatrical release, but after Part 4, which did no business really, they made a bunch of shitty direct-to-video sequels. And Dimensions mimicked the same way. Guillermo del Toro did mimic. It made some money, but not a lot, and they did a bunch of direct-to-video crappy sequels. Well, that was where they were going to head. That's where they were going to go with the Halloween franchise. Their original intent, they had a script written by Robert Zappia. What the thinking was, it was going to be a direct-to-video Halloween film. He wrote a script, but then around the same time, Jamie Lee Curtis realized it was going to be the 20th anniversary of Halloween, the movie that gave her a career. So she approached the Accords and Dimensions about doing a 20th anniversary film. And she wanted Deborah Hill to come back to write and produce, and she wanted John Carpenter to come back to write and direct. Now, Deborah Hill did not come back either, but John Carpenter, there is footage of him saying in an interview that everybody wanted to do it but me, and I said, good luck, and he walked away from it. Now, there is some information online, I don't know if it's true, that they made an offer to him, but he wanted more money, and they went with somebody else. Now, I know if you're a film fan and know if you've heard about some of the nightmare scenarios the Weinstein brothers have put filmmakers through, Wes Craven had a hard time with the Weinsteins on Cursed. It's infamous that, and other Guillermo del Toro and Mimic, they gave him a hard time. John Carpenter, for most of his career, was used to having final cut. His name's above the title. He always wanted everybody to know that it's my movie. If you don't like it, it's my fault, because everything, I wrote it, I directed it, I scored it, it's all on me. That's how John Carpenter viewed his career when he made films. I want everybody to know it's my movie. If it works for you, great, it's mine. If it doesn't work for you, great, it's my fault. I'm the one that made all the decisions. Now, there was no way especially around this time, Carpenter was becoming more, he didn't want to work with studios that much, and he was like, filmmaking was starting to become less fun for him around this time. So I can see Carpenter looking at the Weinsteins and saying, yeah, I don't want no part of that, and walking away. But I don't know if that's true. That's just me talking out loud, but whatever. But they did bring a filmmaker in that is familiar with horror, and that filmmaker is Steve Miner. Steve Miner had directed Friday the 13th Part 2, Friday the 13th Part 3. He did House, he did Warlock, and then after this he wanted to do Lake Placid. Plus, the added bonus was he had already worked with Jamie Lee Curtis on a film, so they were familiar with each other, and she was comfortable with him. So they brought Steve Miner in. Now, armed with a $17 million budget that year, it made $55 in America and $75 worldwide. This film's only an hour and 26 minutes long. It's a brisk watch, and it came out August 5th of 1998. I saw it twice that summer. Once opening week with my friends, and I went a couple weeks later with a girl I was dating at the time. Cast-wise, we got Jamie Lee Curtis back as Laurie Strode / Carrie Tate. We find out quickly that after Part 2, she faked her death and changed her name. We have Josh Hartnett in an early role for him as John, Laurie's son. Adam Arkin plays Will. He's a counselor at this private school in the mountains of California. We have Janet Leigh showing up as the secretary, Norma, and that's a nice callback to Psycho, because there's a scene where she's talking to Carrie Tate, and behind her is the car from Psycho. We also got LL Cool J as the security guard, Ronnie, and LL Cool J is one of those, he's a rapper turned actor who I actually enjoy, and I think he's good in everything I've ever seen him in. When we get to Resurrection, we're going to talk about a rapper turned actor who should have never been hired for Resurrection, but we'll get to that as we get there. And Joseph Gordon-Levitt makes a brief appearance as Jimmy, and at the time he was on Third Rock from the Sun. Also, Michelle Williams is in this film as Molly. She plays Josh Hartnett's girlfriend, and she was starting to have success with Dawson's Creek around the same time. Now, this film starts off in Illinois, not Haddonfield, a different town. And we see the smoking nurse from the first film, Marion Chambers, although in this film she's a different last name. She's coming home from work. She's still a nurse. She's still smoking. And she realizes her front door is ajar, and she goes next door. And this is where we're introduced to Jimmy, and he has a friend hanging out. And she tells him, can I use your phone to call the cops? There's somebody broke into my house. She calls the cops. But Jimmy wants to go over and investigate. So they go over. Marion and the friend stay outside, and he goes in, looks around. The office is all messed up. And we come to find out it's Dr. Loomis's old office because she took care of Dr. Loomis after she was taking care of Loomis for years, and he just recently had passed away, and she left it kind of the same. So he comes out and says everything looks fine, and they go back to his house, and she goes in, but she realizes somebody's still there. So she goes back over to Jimmy's house, and she finds Jimmy in a recliner with an ice skate jammed in his face, and then she goes around the back door, and his friend falls on her. He has a knife in his back. And Michael turns the corner, and we have our first appearance of Michael Myers on the big screen since Halloween 6. And she tries to get away. The cops show up to her house next door, not realizing she's in the house next door struggling with Michael Myers. They go in. She smashes a window to alert them, and Michael pulls her head back, slices her throat, and he gets in the car and takes off. And he has the information he needs because he knows where Laurie Strode is, and that's what he's looking for. And then we're introduced to Laurie Strode. She wakes up from a nightmare, and it shows footage from the original film. She's dreaming about that night, that 20 years earlier on Halloween night in a closet, and they actually show footage from the first film just briefly. And she wakes up screaming, and we realize she has a son named John, and it doesn't take us long to figure out she's an alcoholic, a functioning alcoholic, but an alcoholic nonetheless, and she still thinks about that fateful night 20 years ago. And we see she's in charge of this private posh school, as she says, and nobody there knows her past except for her son. Her son's aware of it, but nobody else knows. And she's dating Will, the counselor, but he doesn't even know that these problems that she's had for the last 20 years. And as the day goes on, we find out that the kids in the school are going on a camping trip, and John and Molly and two of their friends, who are a guy and a girl that are dating, are planning on staying behind, have like a date night, and the only people that are going to be there is Ronnie, Will, and Laurie, or Carrie Tate. Michael makes a beeline for this school because I guess whatever was in Loomis's office gave him the information he needed, and we get this scene at this rest stop in Colorado, I think that's where it was, and this mom and daughter show up there, and they're in the bathroom, and we see Michael's car got a flat tire. And we get a nice little suspenseful scene in this rest stop. Michael doesn't kill them, but he takes her car keys, takes her car, and takes off for California. And they redid this scene again in Halloween 2018, although I think in Halloween 2018 it's a more effective scene. This scene's nice, but I think the one in 2018 is superior to this one. Michael gets to the school. I'm fast-forwarding through some things. He gets in the gate because he tricks Ronnie, and then it's basically Michael kills the two friends. Molly and John are trying to get away from him. There's a chase scene. Will gets killed by Michael Myers. Carrie gets the kids out of there, and she stays behind. She gets an axe, and her and Michael have a battle royale. She thinks she killed them, but she knows he's not dead. So at the end, when the coroners load him in the van, she takes the coroner's van and takes off down this road. Michael starts to get up. She slams the brakes on. Michael flies through the windshield. She rams with the van. They go down over this embankment. Michael gets pinned against a tree, and we get a fantastic ending, which should have been that's why Resurrection should never have been made, because they had to retcon this ending to make that bullshit movie they made they rushed. She decapitates Michael, and that's the end of the film, and we finally hear John Carpenter's original Halloween score. And it's a fantastic ending. Now, is this movie perfect? No. It's not the best Halloween film. I don't know if it's not the best sequel, but it's a damn good slasher film. It was a good film for what it was. A couple problems with the film. The score by John Ottman, it's very orchestral. They dropped the synth score from Carpenter, and I gotta say, it's the worst score of the franchise. And I know they use some musical cues from Scream 1, 2, and Mimic, because they didn't care for John Ottman's score, but his score, it's the worst one in the franchise. I don't care for it. I admire them for trying something different. For me, it doesn't work. It doesn't feel like a Halloween score at all. And thank goodness when they made 2018, they brought John Carpenter back to do the score. yeah, I don't like the score at all. And the other thing I don't really like, the mask sucks. This is the worst mask of the whole franchise, hands down. And I don't like Chris Duran's portrayal of Michael Myers. In my opinion, he is the worst portrayal of Michael Myers. Nothing against the man, I just don't like it. And the mask is god awful. And there's a documentary about the whole problem with the freaking mask. Why has the mask been a freaking tumor on the ass of this franchise? They had $17 million budget for this film. They couldn't get the goddamn mask right. And not only that, at the beginning of the film, when Michael first turns the doorway and we see him for the first time, he's wearing the mask from Halloween 6, which I like that mask. It's a pretty damn effective mask. But the producers, there's a lot of back and forth about whose fault it was. But the producers didn't like the mask. I think the Weinsteins. And then Steve Miner was kind of in the middle. And then you had the Akkads. And then they brought in John Carl Buechler to resculpt his mask from Part 6. They brought KMB in to sculpt a mask. And they even used a shitty-ass CGI mask at one point for a shot in the movie. And you'll know when that is because it looks awful. First of all, the eye holes are way too big. It looks terrible. It's an awful freaking mask. It looks like something somebody made in their basement. And we have great special effects artists making this mask. But they're going off of what the producers wanted and the director. And it sucks. It's the worst mask of the whole franchise. Other than that, some of the story, it's a very streamlined story. There's no meat on this film at all. Now, I know I've read, Steve Miner has said this is a direct sequel to Part 1, but they do reference Part 2. There's a quick reference to Michael burned that night. They never found the body. And Laurie knows that he's her brother. Now, that information did not come out until Part 2, so I don't know what Steve Miner's talking about. This is definitely a direct sequel to the first two films, which is fine. The other thing about this movie is some of the scenes are too well lit. And what I mean by that is there's scenes in hallways. It's nighttime. Not all the lights are on and it's still overly lit. It's almost, I don't know. It's Steve Miner's a fine director in his own right. The directing of this film is okay. There's some nice fluid Steadicam shots that I appreciate they brought back to Steadicam. And it's nicely lit, but it's overly lit. And some of the shots, it looks like a TV movie almost. It's okayly directed. It's not the best directed sequel by far. So that's kind of, I'm nitpicking here, but it's always bugged me a little bit. I don't think it's the best directed sequel. I think Part 4 was better directed, and I think Part 6 was better directed. I know 2018 was definitely better directed. But overall, I still like this film. It's a very fast-paced slasher film, and it's a pretty fun Halloween film. I would give it a 7 out of 10. I think it deserves that. I have some issues with it that I just discussed, but overall, I can still sit down and have a good time with this film. So yes, 7 out of 10 for Halloween H20. What are your thoughts on this Halloween sequel? Leave a comment down below. Let me know. Hit the thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, share this video. I greatly appreciate it. I'll be back next week with a Halloween Resurrection review, and boy, do I got some shit to say about that one. But until then, have a great weekend, and I'll be back soon. Thanks. Bye.